Welcome to Taking Notes. I'm your host, Debra Seftel, and today we're going to be blowing in the woodwind. So we're taking 4 episodes to preview the instruments in an orchestra, starting with those strings. But if you're not into an orchestra, if you're doing a band or if you've ever played in a band, you know that those woodwinds are the biggest group in the orchestra, or in the band, excuse me. So there are lots of woodwind players, and we're going to meet those instruments and get a preview of what they sound like. But they offer a lot of color in an orchestra or a band, and chances are if you've ever played in a school band or beyond that you've got friends who play these instruments and maybe you've tried them yourself. But we're going to go over to the music shop, and Dave Wheeler is going to show us a little bit more in depth about the woodwind family. We're back at the music shop. We're going to look at some woodwind instruments today. And this is a very exciting group of instruments, very diverse. And we have with us to showcase these instruments, Dave Wheeler. Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I work at the music shop. I teach mainly saxophone, flute, and clarinet. I've been playing saxophone since I was about 9 years old. I started playing sax because I thought it sounded really awesome, and I'd seen it in some videos. My grandma listened to some Kenny G, so I was like, oh, that sounds pretty awesome, so I'm going to learn sax, and the rest is kind of history. I went to Rutgers University, studied with Dr. Paul Cohen, studied classical saxophone, played in a lot of ensembles, chamber music, stuff like that. Graduated in 2012, and yeah, I teach
ever since. Fabulous. Yeah. It's a very cool instrument.
I love it.
All right, show us what you got.
All right. So yeah, I guess I'll start with the flute. So we have, these are all woodwind instruments, in case that wasn't mentioned. So woodwind instruments, common misconception, are not actually made out of wood, or at least most of them are not. In the example of flute, we actually have a nickel flute here. And so this instrument does have traces to wooden-made instruments. Actually, the oldest flute ever found was 35,000 years old, found in what is now present-day Germany. So flutes do predate the agricultural revolution. So yeah, they were made of wood back then. But yeah, it's should I do like a demo?
Okay. Show us what it sounds like.
So it sounds like this. It's very high-pitched. I like to think of it as a very pretty sounding instrument. It is capable of moving very quickly. So yeah, that's the flute. We also have the clarinet. Clarinets, typically professional ones, are actually made out of wood, so that is, you can think of it as a true woodwind in that sense. This one is just a student plastic clarinet. But really what makes it a woodwind is that it has this thing called a reed right here. So the reed is the source of the sound. It basically, you blow through the mouthpiece and it vibrates, like so. So cool thing about the clarinet is that it has as we just heard just now, it has a very wide range. I think it's about 3.5 octaves. So it's a very versatile instrument. And of course it has this pleasant sort of woody sound to it. Also capable of some squeaks here and there, you know, a common thing with clarinet. So yeah, that is the clarinet. Oh, it was invented in 1690, by the way, 1690. So that is the clarinet. We also have the saxophone here. So common misconception about saxophone is that it is a brass instrument, hence because of the fact that it actually is made out of brass. However, like the clarinet, it does have a reed similar to the clarinet. It's a little bit bigger, but same idea. We blow through it and it makes noise. So that is saxophone. This is actually a newer instrument compared to our 35,000-year-old flute. This was actually invented in the 1840s by Adolph Sax. And fun fact about the saxophone is it was actually the first one invented was a bass saxophone. It was originally intended to replace the bass clarinet. Of course, that didn't happen because of established orchestral repertoire, but we were left with a wide range of saxophone instruments, ranging all the way from soprano to contrabass. So that's saxophone. We also have the oboe right here. Now, I personally do not play oboe, but it is what is known as a double reed instrument. So, show what that looks like right here. On saxophone and clarinet, we had a single reed coupled with a mouthpiece. On oboe, we actually have two reeds that are kind of pressed against each other here. A lot of professional oboe and also bassoon players will actually make their own reeds. They'll spend, hours and hours trying to get the perfect cut just to get the right sound. But then it just goes right here on the top. And a lot of people confuse it with the clarinet because it does look similar, but it's got a much more, I don't want to say harsh, but it's got like a much more bright sound, I would say, than a clarinet. So that's oboe. Okay.
So these instruments, like saxophones, in a school band, what kind of saxophones would we find?
So we're going to find mainly alto saxophones, which is this. This is what most kids start on, is an alto saxophone. We also will have tenor saxes, which are maybe a bit longer, about like that long or so. And then as we get into middle school and high school, kids will also play the bari sax. Baritone sax, of course, is the full name. And that one is probably about like yay big. So the bigger you get, the lower you get. Yeah.
And generally, we only find these in bands, not so much in orchestras.
Yeah, not an orchestra instrument. Sometimes there will be pieces that will feature saxophone, or maybe even a concerto, like with a saxophone playing in an orchestra accompanying them. But it's not a standard part of the orchestra.
Right. So let's talk about the B flat thing.
Yes.
So this is my question. It's always been my question. So if you're looking at, if I play a C, what are you playing to match my pitch?
So if I play a C, that's going to be your B flat.
All right. So we're a step apart.
Yeah.
Why didn't we make this instrument just a little bit longer?
A lot of it has to, it's a very complicated story. A lot of what it boils down to is we have both with clarinet and saxophone and even brass instruments, we have so many different versions of the instrument which are not necessarily a full octave apart. So what they do is they kind of consolidate the keys that they're in, so that way it's easier to switch between instruments. So for example, if you switch between an alto and a tenor saxophone, those are in two different keys. But if you look at a G on the page and you finger a G, it's the same for alto and tenor.
Right, but not the same for me.
Not the same for you.
Right.
Yeah. So
I just think we've made a world of complication that somewhere along the line we could have, nixed that.
Yeah,
and there would have been, orchestrations would have been so much easier. Everybody would be in the same key. There'd be so many good things about that.
Yeah, it definitely gets pretty complicated with band instruments for sure. But it's kind of the...
But when you learn them, you learn your key and you learn them with your fingerings, and all is good, as long as you don't try to play with your brother who's playing the violin.
Pretty much. Right. Yeah, you learn one sax and you learn them all, same with clarinet.
Right.
Essentially.
And a lot of those players switch between pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Which is
exactly.
great.
Yep.
Sure. Well, this is great. We have wind instruments that we blow into. We've seen the stringed instruments where we are pulling out a sound with a bow, and we're going to see in our next episode some brass instruments where we're also blowing. So things that look like your saxophone, but not. I didn't know that saxophone was made by a Mr. Sax.
Yes, that's how it's got to be.
Well, yeah,
Yep.
but it's one of those things that we just always knew it was a saxophone. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Dave. And if you need some more information about any of these instruments, he's our guy. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much, Dave. Thank you for giving us a closer look at the flute, the clarinet, the saxophones, and even into an oboe. We're all excited about those instruments, and as I say, most of us have seen them up close and in person, whether you play them or a family member or maybe a friend of yours does. So we want to make sure that we understand woodwind instruments. We're going to see a band, a local band from the Brooklawn Middle School with Joe Stella conducting, and we're going to play us out with the Brooklawn Middle School Concert Band.